Did I tell you guys ever my Billy Walker story?
Oh, maybe.
Maybe I told it on a previous podcast with you guys. I probably should have watched the old ones first. But so we got to Glendronach like pretty late at night. Had a few drams. Actually, it was pretty wild. They let us like go into Billy's office and take some samples from like bottles behind his desk, which was pretty wild. Anyways, next morning, of course, like I'm jet lagged. Everyone else, like, because it was late the night before, sleeping in. But I just got up early. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go try to find some food, coffee. So I go downstairs. There's a little kitchen. Like I sit down and I'm just like looking outside. Like you can see like the distillery in the background. Like so, this guy comes in, like asks, just what I want for breakfast, if I want coffee. So I'm like, all right. I'm like, I wonder if Billy's around. And then the guy comes in, brings the food, sits down. He's like, hi, I'm Billy Walker.
Hey, welcome to Super Social Club. I'm Jeremy.
This is Whiskey and the Six. I'm Rob.
Welcome to the Whisky Rant Podcast.
It's a little crusty,
It's frustrating.
and it's going to be a little bit of a rant.
I don't understand it. I don't know why.
Some sort of injustice.
Anyway, end rant.
Hello and welcome back to the Whisky Rant Podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Rob.
And today we're joined by our boy James. We are drinking some serious expressions here from Compass Box. This is kind of like part two of the Big Blend uh, Quartet.
Quartet.
We talked
I
about
think you have more than 100 years worth of whiskey in front of you.
yeah. We talked about the first two, the Delos and the
Ultramarine.
Ultramarine. Now
Yeah.
we have the Metropolis and Celestial.
Yeah. Celestial, Metropolis. Celestial being, I think, Metropolis being the oldest of the four, if I'm not mistaken, by average speaking.
Well, they're all sneaky old.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I was looking up the ages of these, and we'll show them on the screen. Um, and by we, I mean Jeremy will show them on the screen.
Yeah, a lot of people still don't know this, that yeah, you can go to the Compass Box website and you can get the exact age and components of everything they produce. You just need to know what a tree ring is, and you can figure out what's going on pretty quickly.
I find when I'm counting the rings sometimes though, like I lose, like I have to redo it like a couple times.
Like your brain starts to hurt.
Yeah, because I'm trying to count from the bottom up, and then
Right.
I'm not sure if I counted that line. Did I count that line? Did I not count that line? Then I got to count that line again.
Yeah, if you ever want to feel older than you are, get like an inch from your screen with your finger and try to count the lines.
Say the age of brackets.
No,
Ah.
no, that's the. I think that was part of why they can. I don't know, something to do with the age statement. I don't know.
Yeah, so the theme with all of these whiskeys, there's four of them in total, of course, being called the Quartet, and they all were kind of designed to like bring back some sort of blend that they can no longer make or that's no longer available in the market. Now, obviously, you could do that. Like you could have 100 of these because there's so much history of blended Scotch, and it just kind of goes by the wayside. I mean, I know you guys do some work with Glenallachie sometimes. They make the McNairs and the White Heather. Like those used to be important big volume brands in Scotland at one point, but that's like more than 40 years ago, right? So like things move around. It hasn't just been, Johnny Walker Red Label forever. Well, maybe it has been, but the point is that there is a lot of history to that, and so I think Compass Box, yeah, just kind of took this opportunity. So the first one was the Ultramarine, which was essentially recreating the first Johnny Walker Blue Label. And they even if you look at the recipe, they really use the right components, and it's a fascinating experiment. And then the second one, they went very different, and they recreated the Asila, which is one of the first Compass Boxes that people often ask for to come back, and so they recreated it with just an incredible recipe that is basically 25-year-old Imperial. Was in the Delos. I know you guys love that one.
Ellis was awesome. Okay.
Yeah, I love it as well. To me, that's like an all-time Compass Box release that is up there, even with things like luxury whiskey in general, and 3-year-old deluxe. I think it's in that tier. And then yeah, so then the last two are a little bit more niche. So you have Metropolis, which has just that wonderful kind of like sketch work of the city. And have you guys ever read the book Rob Roy? Do you ever have to read that in school?
I didn't.
It sounds familiar, but no.
Isn't it
Yeah.
as well? There's a movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like a famous piece of literature. Um, and yeah, there's kind of some references to a character um, in the book. The lore with these Compass Box releases, like you can, I feel like this set in particular, like you can like if you're into like geeking out on like the lore behind whiskey, this is like peak. And I think that speaks a little bit to James Saxon, who's been the master blender at Compass Box now for more than 5 years. Um, so yeah, this is kind of like I'd like to think this is kind of like the peak of his like early years here at Compass Box. He's really done some cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so all these are bottled 40. So the Metropolis is 49%. The Celestial is 50%. I believe the Metropolis has a good amount of grain whiskey in it as well.
Yeah, so they all do have a percentage of grain whiskey. It's usually about a quarter in these blends. Um, and then there's kind of like a malt core with all of them as well. So like Delos, of course, that was, there was a big chunk that was about a quarter of 23-year-old Glenalgan, and then I think there was about 30% 25 Imperial, and the Metropolis is built around the main core is 30-year Aberlour and 29-year Milton Duff.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now.
So, which is something you don't see very often. I mean, if someone said like, "Are you familiar with 30-year-old Aberlours?" Like, no.
No, yeah, there's
That,
not.
that would be something that, the people that were fortunate to like go through the independent bottling era of like 20 to 30 years ago. I think that kind of stuff was maybe a little bit more readily available from like the SMWS but
There's an awesome creamy vanilla that like tapers into a passion fruit and orange kind of note on the Metropolis, and it's something that I pick up a lot when there's a good amount of grain whiskey in an older blend.
mhm.
But this one does a great job of not letting it finish the way some of those grain whiskeys would in the past that I've tried. This one goes like it starts with that really nice vanilla, and then, like I said, it just develops into this super fruit.
Viscosity is off the charts too. It's very viscous.
Yeah, for sure. And I think
Yeah, this one every time I've poured it at an event, it really sneaks up on people because let's be honest, like the artwork and the name, it's not this really none of this set is like flashy. The first one, of course, there's the story of the Johnny Walker, and the last one has the old Ardbeg in it. So there are these like details that kind of catch your attention, but like on the scale of like flashiness of Compass Box releases, which sometimes they are, right? Like sometimes it's like very eye-catching, very kind of marketing driven. These ones, like it feels like they're very downplayed for what's in them and for how they taste.
Yeah,
Um, so Metropolis is. Have you guys ever heard of a whiskey called Bailey Nickel Jarvie? Jarvis? Sorry, not Jarvie. Yeah, unusual. You might see it at like auctions, but yeah, basically in another era in the whiskey business, it was actually the Glenmorangie company that owned this blend, and the idea behind the blend was that like they actually advertised that they were more malt driven and that they were premium. So, like that's just something you don't see as much now. Obviously, Compass Box has been championing that this idea that there's like blended Scotch that's not just bottom shelf, because of course historically for from the mid 1800s when grain whiskey appeared, there was lots of premium blended Scotch out there. Like you had it more at tiers, like single malts kind of slotted somewhere in the middle, right? So I think Metropolis kind of is designed to kind of harken back to that type of idea.
Oh, I was just saying that, yeah, James, you were kind of saying that, like, you thought that, this set was kind of like underrated, kind of flew under the radar. But, I mean, what you're getting with these are like, super.
Yeah, if I was betting, I'm gonna guess that sets of this and even individual bottles will remain good value for a long time. People ask me all the time about collecting, like especially if you have, if you have an old bottle, obviously general bottles are really rare, but even if you have like a luxury whiskey or 3-year-old deluxe or Tobias and Angel, I think those are like some of the best values in collectible whiskey out there. I know there was recently an auction in Canada where a luxury whiskey went for over $1,200. So I think like it wouldn't shock me if at some point, like late in my career, the prices of some of those like really explode because there's just such a limited supply. But yeah, this one's an under the radar one that will be, when you're looking for those gems out there, um, you can kind of pick your favorite of the four, and I'm sure there'll be bottles floating around for a long time.
It's funny because if you look at the four, two of them are pretty much not peated, and then two of them are, like, I wouldn't say significantly peated, but like you definitely get a peat forward approach.
Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah, like Metropolis has a big chunk of 18-year-old Bowmore, and I think like you do get that on the finish. Like there's that fruity smoke, but it's pretty subtle.
Yeah, I mean, like typical with older Bowmore, you don't get a ton of peat,
No.
right? Whereas the Celestial has, like, I think it's 17 or 18-year old um, Ardbeg, and
Yeah, I
it's
actually think it's 19. So 19-year-old Ardbeg is one of the main ingredients. It's the exact same Ardbeg that was in the original No Name, which I've always thought was like the one kind of outlier Compass Box release throughout history because it's just kind of so brash and in your face, which is not like usually Compass Boxes are like you walk away thinking like, wow, that's like a really well balanced, well put together whiskey. And Compass Box was just, or the No Name was just like heavy metal, like just loud noises.
True. Even the Heat Monster was like pretty well balanced.
yeah, yeah, like um, I did a peat monster. I think it was the peat monster cast strength or
Yeah, yeah, great one.
longbow.
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, it's obviously exactly what it's advertised to be. It's a beast, right? So,
Yeah, so some of the other components in Celestial, there is then some older Old Pulteney, which I believe is 22, and Kalila, which is 22.
I mean, it sounds like a recipe for an amazing.
absolutely. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, I find Celestial just to be, for a whiskey with these like old, peated elements, it's just very pleasant and friendly.
Yeah. Very approachable, very, I
Yeah.
mean, especially if you're, it doesn't drink 50%, maybe.
So they're 49, 50,
40,
and 49.
the Celestial is 50. And honestly, I would never guess that. I don't think. Maybe, you know, it's super approachable. Very, very importantly, if you're a peat fan, I think.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed in Canada that these peated compass boxes tend to generate the biggest hype, whether it's Flaming Heart, even like new ones that are coming out, when they announce Secrets of Smoke. Got lots of messages about that. Every time there's a new Flaming Heart, you guys probably saw there's a new Flaming Heart coming out this year that the main ingredient actually is older Talisker, which they've never gone in that direction. Again, that's the James Saxon influence. So I find those ones definitely generate more hype.
Yeah.
Are you
Um,
guys on their the blending room email list? That's something you guys can do after this. So they started this club called the Blending Room, and you do have to pay a bit to enter, unfortunately, but um, yeah, they're doing some cool promotions through that. So it'd be interesting to see what they turn that into.
is that accessible in Canada? Like as
Yeah,
far as you send
yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people know like Compass Box has changed hands in the last 5 years. There's some new ownership there, and there's some new ideas. Obviously, James, the whiskey is can, there's not a lot of changes there, going from John Glaser to James Saxon, but I do think there's some things that are really interesting and positive. You know, having now been involved with Compass Box myself for 12 years, like Compass Box became this kind of like cult-like club, if you will, where either usually there was two types of people, even amongst whiskey enthusiasts. There was the type that were like, that's a blend. I think a lot of people that like weren't in the cult kind of always looked like skeptically at Compass Box. They're like, you know what? These guys have these fancy packages. Like what? Like they kind of felt like they're getting hoodwinked a little bit. Like okay, are these guys like shoving some like goofy, off the second rack casks into like this fancy packaging and trying to sell it to me at this whatever price? Like that's kind of like the skepticism I think that I find like when I'm out and selling and promoting, like people always have that you can tell in the back of their mind that they're like what is this? Like where like it doesn't make sense to them. But then there's always a point where people kind of like cross the threshold and then they like go hard because I think once you like get into the culture and you realize how good the value usually is, um, then you're in. And then you got people that are like trying to buy six of every release and have an entire wall of their whiskey collection that's just like pure Compass Box releases. But my own personal thought is that in this Extinct Blends quartet is a perfect example of it. Is like you're not going to love every release from them, right? Like you're going to have ones that speak to you, and then a different one might speak to someone else. But you shouldn't expect it's not like following like Ben Romick where there's kind of like these themes, and you might love the distillate of Ben Romick specifically, right? Like there's Compass boxes all over the place.
Yeah, I
They
think
don't all fit in a set, even though this specific one is a set.
yeah,
They
I think
just happen to be in the same glass.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Elos and the Celestial stand out the most for me, I think. I mean, I like the Metropolis. I love that passion fruit note that I get on it.
Mhm.
Something about, I mean, the Ultramarine was peated as well, from like what I remember. Obviously, we don't.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, just, Johnny Walker Blue, there was some old Kalila in there as well. It wasn't, the most forward element, but it was definitely in there.
yeah, was that also 49 or 50%?
Yes. Yeah, they were all kind of roughly in that range.
Do you think that the success of Compass Box comes with them disclosing every single parcel of what goes into this? Because you're mentioning before about how like, oh, it's a blend, whatever, and people might not necessarily like gravitate towards it. But do you think if they didn't have that disclosure, that they wouldn't be as popular as they are?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the like intuitions that John had early on was that like you're kind of up against it if you're this company. Like this is the thing, right? Like if you're Compass Box, like they can't get away with releasing a bad product because people are already skeptical going in, right? Like it's not like if a new Ardbeg release comes out, people are like, "Oh, this is probably bad, but I'll make sure it's good first." But like that's what people do with Compass Box, right? So it kind of forced I think it forced them to be like, "Okay, like we have to have good packaging to stand out. We have to like bottle non-chill filtered and non-colored and and be super transparent with those recipes." Like I think they kind of knew like if we don't engage the community and hope for some trickle down, um, like just the baseline of like the idea of like these are a great example. There's $600 Canadian for a blended scotch. Like you can't just like slide that in under the radar and have an inferior product. Like you've got to bring more to the table than just the liquid.
So I think, I mean, we're all seeing the trends now with pricing, and maybe we're on the other side of the hill as like when with whiskey being at its boom and all that other stuff. Do you think Compass Box intentionally targeted quote unquote the whiskey geek in order to sustain long term success? Because I find that like a lot of the companies that maybe geared themselves toward the fair weather fan are going to feel it the most, like Macallan.
Yeah.
You know, whereas maybe those guys that built a whiskey geek fan base.
Yeah. Well, this is the unique place that Compass Box is in now is that I feel like specifically they're looking at what they've built and they're kind of saying to themselves, you know what, we can still be this interesting blended scotch company, but like maybe appeal a little bit more to the fair weather fan. Like they actually haven't really tried that hard to appeal to the fair weather fan at all over the years. Like it's been pretty geared to the enthusiast. So now you see like even the release of Orchard House, I think, is a great example of that. I feel like in another age they might have called that like something kind of weird and made a big deal about how like the casks, were washed in the US first and that, but instead they like focused on the fruity nature. Like I think there's a bit of a mentality shift there too, where it's like, what, we can like give people a little bit of a soft landing in terms of just the approachability of the brand. Because yeah, when I started with Compass Box, like every release we had on the shelf was kind of nerdy,
Yeah.
but that's not true anymore. Now, especially the new releases, the Nectarosity and the Crimson Cast, like those are pretty friendly. And like, you could just take that home and just pop and pour with both of those. And like, you kind of don't need any of the lore. Now, if you want to get into that, like, it's there for you for sure. And they're very much authentic to like what Compass Boxes has done. But there's still a lot of people out there that walk into the liquor store, they've got $100 in their pocket, and they're like, "Oh, what's this bottle with like cake on the label? It sounds kind of delicious, right?"
Yeah.
So, so yeah, in a way, it's funny. Like Compass Box is almost going like the opposite of the rest of the business that way. Which you're right. Like some of those brands that have, they started out as niche and then they expanded, and now you're right. They're going to have to kind of suck back a little bit, I think, and realize like who their core audience really is that's paying the bills. Because yeah, it's tough times in the Scotch business right now.
I think as people become more knowledgeable about health and all those sorts of things, you're gonna see a big transition in people wanting more of this sort of thing
Yeah,
as a special experience as opposed to a daily like 3 4 drams.
totally. Yeah, bourbon, to be honest, is a good example of that scenario that you're describing because, okay, I remember like about 10 years ago when we launched Michter's Bourbon as a company. And, I would go into BC liquor stores and I was part of the sales call when we first got them to list it. They were like, who is going to pay $100 for bourbon? And my argument was, you have all these $100 scotches. Give the bourbon drinkers something like that, something that is aspirational. And at the time, if you were like going to be upsold on bourbon, you like that meant like Woodford Reserve or Booker's. Like those were your kind of options. And you look like the bourbon business stepped up and provided this whole framework of like small batches and more premium. And then, you had like the halo of like Pappy and like it's hard to remember, but even 10 years ago, like none of that existed. So there was like nothing. So as much as it's like, yeah, all those $40 bottles are driving the business, it's like actually the boom in whiskey had nothing to do with the $40 bottles. It was all driven by the premium halo effect, right? And there's like just such a massive trickle down that comes from that.
Ultimately, now that James Saxon has the reins with Compass Box, this series is done. What's going to be the next kind of replacement for the Extinction Quartet?
Yeah, so what I'm noticing at Compass Box, so like the releases that are this year are a great example. So Compass Box, of course, is doing hedonism now every year, like one batch, and it's just kind of like a one single small batch. They have a great artist from Argentina that's involved. It's worth going to, their YouTube channel and watching videos about that process and, kind of seeing behind the scenes. Go to Compass Box's website, watch the videos. It's actually really interesting to kind of see how they approach and go about making that stuff. And then yeah, you've got two peated releases coming down the pipe. So there's a new Flaming Heart, which I mentioned again, which is like led by Talisker. That's kind of in that like 17-year range. And then there's the Secrets of Smoke, which is a little bit like a follow-up, I think, to No Name. And it's like high proof, like it's over 52%. Um, so I think like that's a really good example of where Compass Box is going in the future is that like in the past, like Secrets of Smoke would have been, I think, more of like a niche kind of nerdy type of release directed at like Pete heads. But they call it Secrets of Smoke and they've put it in this like very approachable packaging. Like they've kind of sanded the edges off a little bit, and I think that's a good thing for Compass Box.
It seems like Compass Box is very unique in the way that they do blend. Is there anyone, or will there be anyone in the future that kind of competes with them and kind of does the same thing where they're pulling these incredible past and blending them to make these profiles.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting space to watch, right? I always thought that there's a lot of like darts being thrown at the blended Scotch board. I mean, everyone realizes like blended Scotch is still over 80% of the business. No one has really struck gold in premium blended Scotch yet, right? Like Monkey Shoulder definitely was successful, but it like didn't really speak to everybody. Um, right? Because in bourbon, like that exists, right? Like there's base bourbons that you would be like, well, of course I'm gonna just have that on my shelf, right? Like I don't know, I keep a bottle of, you know, the Four Roses like single barrel, like I just keep it around, even though that's like a fairly generic release. But like the Scotch drinkers aren't usually the same, right? It's not like you're like, oh, whatever, like that mainstream brand, like I always just keep one around. Like it's not the same thing, right? So there, it does feel like there's like a gap in that, like someone hitting like truly like a mainstream blend that feels like a core product, right? Like single malts have taken all those spots
Yeah.
for the most part.
And I'll just
Um,
on every
right,
single.
like where's like the Boona 12 of blended Scotch,
Yeah.
right? Or the Ardbeg 10 of blended Scotch. Like it kind of doesn't really exist.
Well, just
Like there's things that are close,
Yeah, but like
but
box, like who is their main competitor? Who's doing what they're doing? There's nobody.
yeah. So I guess this is my point is that if it's a dartboard, you know, and no one's hit the center yet, there's a lot of like all around the circle. Like there's Compass Box, which is doing this like, you know, great packaging with Stranger and Stranger, and they're kind of very experimental in what they're releasing. And then you've got Turntable, which I'm sure you guys are familiar. Like to me, Turntable, what they've done is there's kind of some threads with their actual style, and like I find like their whiskeys to be very like approachable and friendly. Whereas historically, Compass boxes, some of them are not necessarily like friendly. It's like it's almost designed for an enthusiast. Whereas like Turntable to me is much more like it's I mean, excuse the pun, but it's much more plug and play,
There's
right?
one. They do a couple, don't they? Or no? Because they
Sorry, who?
SMWS.
SMWS. Because like
Oh
they
yeah. So that's a good example. Obviously what's the company I'm thinking of? The Lang family. Yeah, Douglas Lang, I guess. I get the two Lang families confused since they split, but um, so yeah, they do like the Scallywag and like those ones, which yeah, very good whiskeys. They, you know, maybe I'm sure they would admit it maybe needs a little bit of a retooling there. Um, and you know, there Glenallechy's a good example, right? Like McNair's and White Heather. Well, like that McNair's, like the 10-year-old cast strength has like cast strength Lagavulin as one of the main ingredients. Like it doesn't feel like they quite hit the center of the bullseye there either, right? Like it's a good effort and it's great whiskey, but it doesn't like really speak to the average consumer.
John Glaser right now, and what is his
You
like?
know what? That's a really good question. I know, doesn't it feel like the end of a movie about Compass Box and there it would like cut to a shot of him like in the park with his dog, right? Like what is he doing? There's no way. So I know people in the business that have like personal relationships with John and yeah, I mean, he's not done,
Right?
but
He's gonna pop
it's
up
all just speculative at this point.
soon, right? I would think so.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah,
cutscene.
I thought like, you know, does Diageo back the truck up and try to get him back on board and he goes back to like where he started? I don't know.
I think the cutscene is more like him walking into a new distillery and being like, "Let's go, baby."
Because
Right?
like yeah, I mean, he could go to Gordon MacPhail and be like, I'm gonna blend your stuff and I'm gonna release this
Well, he
line.
has a lot of history with Gordon MacPhail. You probably know, like Gordon MacPhail bottled all of his early releases. He bought like a lot of the stock, like those blended batches that all came from Gordon MacPhail.
Yeah, yeah.
He needs a candy store, right? He needs a candy store of a selection of
Yes.
easy stuff where he could just go, did we did
Yeah.
have this inventory that he could do his magic with.
I think that's where Gordon MacPhail needs to like explore next is putting some blends together that can just absolutely blow people's minds at like 48%.
Yeah, you're gonna see some fun stuff in that space. That can be another podcast, but I think you'll see some fun stuff in that space.
You want to score these things?
Should we score these things?
You know what? I went back and I poured some more of the
Delos? Oh, good.
I mean, I would say the Delos is my favorite.
Delos is the favorite.
So good.
So good.
Delos is a style of whiskey that for me is like what I look for in whiskey, which is like that like succulence and the tropical fruit. That to me is like peak.
Yeah. All right, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough if you're going to compare them to the Delos, because I think I scored that one before. I think I said it was like 90. It was over 90.
Yeah.
I think these other two are approaching 90. I think they're not maybe quite there, but I would probably put them right at like 89, 100 for both.
Okay.
I think if I was going to maybe take a half point more, I would stick like the Metropolis over the.
Interesting. I would actually go the other way. So I would go 88 for Metropolis, 89 for the Celestial.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're talking like right around.
For that.
So, yeah, I've done a few tastings now with, where I've had rooms full of clubs or, festivals where people have tried all four. And, on paper, I think, the Celestial with the old Ardbeg in it and the Ultramarine with the Johnny Walker story, like those are the ones that grab people's attention. But I would say that Metropolis has probably been the most popular of the lineup overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would probably say that was
It's just so rich and decadent.
Yeah, it's got
and
that.
it stands out because of that when you put them all side by side.
Yeah, you don't get that very often, that opportunity to have old Abelard.
What's their oldest age statement?
But who buys age stated? OB.
Yeah, I mean, look, if there was a 30-year-old, OB Aberlour, it probably would be pretty pricey too. So,
Over.
Yeah.
You're the man. Thank you so much for sending these bottles. I mean, we love you. You know that.
Well, I won't have whiskey like this forever, so we'll ride the train while it's moving. Thanks for having me.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks for coming. Jeremy's gonna sign us off, but always we're waiting for the day where James Bornn is sitting between us on set here. I mean, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Whether you
I gotta be careful coming into Ontario.
Leave us a comment down below. What do you think about Compass Box whiskey, and what's your prediction on where John Glaser lands next? What's going on with him? Leave us a comment down below with all your predictions. Thanks so much for watching. Much appreciated. Have a good one.